All right, let's welcome in Frankie Corrado, TSN hockey analyst. Frank, what's going on, man? It's great to have you back on WST.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to be back.
Well, I have to tell you, you're coming at a good time because we need some answers. The Winnipeg Jets have become the most puzzling hockey club maybe in the National Hockey League. 2 months ago, we were talking about a team that was first in the Western Conference. And now, to be honest, coming out of last night, a desperately needed 2 points where you think people would be saying, okay, that's a big win, move forward. Honestly, I think last night leaves more questions than it does answers about where this hockey team is right now, despite getting a very, very much needed 2 in the standings.
I'm really surprised. I am. With the way the Jets played to start the year and through the first half of the year, it almost felt like they had gone through the heavy lifting of whatever was the issue last year. They had worked through that. They had found a way to come out of it on the other side. And you're thinking, okay, like, you rectified whatever it was that was ailing you, whether it was star players being frustrated, not engaged, not playing consistent on a night-to-night basis, giving up too much in front of Connor Hellebuyck. Like, I truly thought they were on the other side of that, but they're right back in it. And that's the thing that scares probably a lot of Jets fans and a lot of us who watch this team play very often. It's like, why are these old habits creeping back into your game? It's a new coach. You know, we've heard the narratives all season long as far as how they bought into playing this system under Rick Bowness, and it was a little stingier defensively. And, you know, we were seeing a lot of the great of Connor Hellebuyck early on in the season. And yes, he's a guy who gets called upon more often than a lot of goaltenders. But quite frankly, the team in front of him was doing a much better job at that point. And now it's like, it's a constant onslaught in front of Hellebuyck. And there isn't that kind of intensity to keep players out of the slot and getting those chances. And there's just not as much urgency offensively. Like, I did the game on Saturday against the Nashville Predators, and I was kind of shocked to see how many times UC Staros could just see a puck. Like, it was just, there was no traffic in front of him. There was no urgency as far as making sure someone kind of stopped and planted there and made sure he wasn't able to see things. And quite frankly, like, they've kind of lost that edge that they were playing with to start the year. Like, how many times do you see them play the Leafs and they get up for that kind of game and Dubois is in Matthews' kitchen all game, it seems like. And there's a little sandpaper, there's a little extra energy to it. I know you can't play like that over 82 games, and you can have little lapses throughout the course of a season, but it's really gone on way too long now. They've lost whatever magic they had in the first half of the year.
Well, and they've also lost the entire cushion that they had earned at the beginning of the year. And, I mean, this is what's so confounding, Frank. I mean, we're talking about game 71 of the regular season, playing for your playoff lives. And even when good things happen like they did in the first period, I mean, complete regression. I just have no idea how you can get dominated for a full 20 minutes like they did by the Arizona Coyotes in the situation they were in last night after getting 2 goals in the first period.
And that's the thing that's puzzling to me. Listen, I played for some coaches that maybe I didn't agree with or didn't care for. And I played some coaches that I thought were excellent. Rick Bowness is one of those guys that I thought was absolutely brilliant. Excellent coach, wanted to play for him every single night. And when you look at the comparisons between the teams that are in the mix right now in the Western Conference, you have Winnipeg, who you talk about the cushion, it's kind of going away. But the Calgary Flames, chasing them, but not really, because the Calgary Flames are in a way just playing just as bad or maybe worse. And in that situation, I can kind of understand. It feels like there's a little more tension there between the coaching staff and the players. And there's been some things that have come out of that room this year, whether it was the Jacob Pelletier situation or, Jonathan Huberdeau. And it feels like there's been some tension there. I think Nazem Kadri has voiced some opinions this year as well. So over there, like, I can almost understand it being an ex-player when they come out for a game in Calgary and it's like, oh, you guys are in a playoff push. Where's that push? Where's that extra jump in your step? You don't seem to have it. I don't understand it for Winnipeg. I really don't. Bowness is a new coach. He's done a really good job of turning this team around, and it felt like he had them really bought in on a certain mindset and mentality. And quite frankly, when you're in like a free fall, the way the Winnipeg Jets are in, this sort of tailspin, you would think there's enough veteran leadership and presence in that room, on the ice, on the bench, to kind of grab a hold of things and not hold the coaching staff as the guys that need to hold everyone accountable. Like, that's the difference between good teams and great teams, and you hear it all the time. And it's a different situation because Boston is very dominant, but why don't we take a look at Boston? Anyone who's ever played for that team, and even Jim Montgomery has talked about it this year, it's like, that's a room that kind of just operates on its own. It polices itself. Like, Montgomery came in, and all he had to do was kind of listen to the players that had already established that, whereas Bowness had to come in and he had to change a lot of things. He had to turn things around and have players buy in on a certain mentality. And going back to what I said previously, I really thought the heavy lifting was done and they were on the other side of it. It's weird to see the old habits creeping back into this team's game. And even like the body language, the frustration, it really is puzzling to me.
Well, and Frank, I mean, you can maybe speak to this. I mean, National Hockey League coaches only have so many cards that they can play. And it was, I guess, last week on Tuesday, after a couple wins, Rick Bowness sat Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, and Nito Niederreiter for an extended period in that game. And, you know, when you do that, you're looking for some sort of response. And frankly, they've had a response. It's been the exact opposite, I think, of what the coaches were intending to get out of that. And it just seems to be so problematic when the biggest issues are starting with your most important players, the guys that play the most, that you rely the most on every single night.
That's exactly it. You're 100% right. This is a league like many other leagues in hockey and every sport. You win and lose with your leaders. You win and lose with your best players. And the best players, their play has dropped off. It's funny, like I'm watching Winnipeg's power play the other night, and Blake Wheeler was a very good player, been a good player for a long time. He's on the half wall. And I'm thinking, that's not a spot for Blake Wheeler, right? Like, it seemed like every time the power play, first of all, had a hard time getting into the zone, which I thought was a glaring issue. But anytime they actually did get into the zone, I'm like, okay, everyone's kind of like getting the puck, and then they're getting their head up, and then they're processing things, and then they're making a decision. It's like, it's way too slow. There needs to be something there where it's like, you kind of know what your scheme is, what your plan is, and as you're getting the puck, or before you get the puck, you took a quick peek, you know what you want to do with it. When they do that, power play's not bad, but it's so slow right now. It's very methodical. It seems like it would be pretty easy to sniff out what they're trying to do. So that's one of the other issues. And then 5-on-5 play goes, it's perimeter. Like, it really is perimeter right now. So it is puzzling because I've been in kind of like game review meetings, and I think the coaches do a good job of making sure that there's one idea or thought, and they really hammer that home. And when you watch Winnipeg play, it's hard to not think that thought or that idea they're trying to hammer home is there needs to be a presence in the middle of the ice, whether it's getting the puck off the wall in the defensive zone, in the neutral zone, even maybe more importantly in the offensive zone, and finding ways to try and penetrate the middle of the ice. They don't seem to be doing that very well. And there's like no presence in front of any kind of net they're playing in front of. It's really weird because they have bigger bodies. They have guys that aren't afraid to go to those areas. And yeah, it's the star players. Like, you're not going to win games with Vlad Namestnikov and Barron. They're nice pieces. And when they're slotted correctly, they add something to your team. But ultimately, this comes down to the guys that have been here for a long time, that have had the trials and tribulations of last year, all the noise throughout the offseason, and the guys that you thought when everything was going great, it was really positive. Now's kind of when you see what you got, right? Because it was going great, not going great now, and we're starting to see, like, I don't know if you see it as well, but I see the body language, I see the frustration, and if a coach is going to sit you for a period of time, it's not because he hates you, not because he doesn't like you, not because anything. The coach needs you. He needs those players to be at their best. And if he's doing that, it seems like a last resort. It really seems like he's ran out of things to do, because if you can resolve something without having to embarrass your star players, likely there were multiple avenues that were explored before it got to that point.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, it does seem like a last resort. And I guess when you make decisions like this, I mean, it can go a couple ways. The response of those players is what will determine how good of a move it was. You can have guys that go back to kind of, it is somewhat of a wake-up call and get back to doing what they're doing. I guess in some cases, and we might be seeing it right now, it almost pushes them farther away from where they are, and that is a big, big problem for the Winnipeg Jets right now. I mean, from your playing career, can you remember, star players on a team being challenged in the way that Rick Bowness has, trying to get more to the guys that you depend on the most, and it not resulting in the way that the coach intended?
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, like, I was never, I don't want to say relevant player in the NHL, but I had some moments throughout my career, whether it was the AHL or times throughout the NHL, where I didn't have my game, and it felt like it was more often than not, to be honest with you. The thing that I found very challenging was I was really hard on myself as a player. And anytime I would make a mistake, I would just kind of grab a hold of that, and I couldn't let it go. And I feel like a lot of players nowadays, it almost feels like I'm not doing anything wrong. It's you, or it's that guy. And it's like, that's the wrong mentality to have. And I don't think that's, indicative of a lot of players on the Winnipeg Jets, but you never know. And when you see certain things, it kind of perks your interest. It's like, okay, why are you frustrated? Are you frustrated because you're not finding your game and you're going through a spell where it's just not coming to you the way it usually does? Or are you looking back at your coach and thinking, this guy doesn't get it, or he doesn't understand, and I'm checked out? Because that's a losing attitude. That's a losing mentality. And I've been pretty lucky throughout the course of my career where I played with some pretty special players. I played with the Sedin twins in Vancouver. I got to play with some awesome players in Toronto. Like some awesome people. I got to play a cup of coffee with the Pittsburgh Penguins and see how those players and Crosby and Letang, those guys operate. So I think I got to see the players where they didn't have it for whatever reason, and they were frustrated because they couldn't put it together. And sometimes it takes time. I just wonder with the Jets, are they at that point, and are they trying to come out of it better on the other side? Listen, everyone wants to win. Everyone wants to be a part of the solution, or so they say, right? Like, sometimes your actions speak louder than words. And so I've seen it throughout the course of my career. I've seen coaches be really hard on star players. Like Tortorella is a guy I played for in Vancouver. That season was very well documented as far as, what he demanded on players. I don't think having high demands for a player is an issue, and for a team, I really don't. When you see coaches being condescending, kind of degrading and really going out of their way to embarrass guys, that's kind of where I would say, it more falls on the coach, and I can understand players kind of tuning those guys out. I don't see that with Winnipeg. I don't think Rick Bowness is trying to call guys out and embarrass them and be demeaning in any way, shape, or form. I think he sees a team that knows there's more there. He knows there's more capability. And like the players would be frustrated when you're not having it and you're maybe not having a great stretch of hockey, there would be frustration for the coach, because there's only so much you can do. You can't be out there playing for the players. You can only give them the tools and resources to help them, but ultimately that falls on them. So I sense a lot of frustration right now in Winnipeg from the players going through a bad patch of hockey, not playing their best hockey, but from the coach who knows that the bar has been set a little higher for this team, and they've underachieved for a long time now.
Frankie Corrado of TSN's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. It's interesting you mentioned that, because watching the way Rick Bowness has handled the media has changed over the course of this season. I mean, when they were a first-place hockey club in the first half of the year, he was far more willing to, even after wins, point out that, the way the team played last night wasn't going to get it done, not necessarily calling out individuals, but preaching that, you need to do these things the right way. And even in a win, they maybe didn't do that. They really did preach the accountability. Over the course of the last month or so, Frank, as this is really the bottom sort of seemingly fallen out on this club, he hasn't gone back there. He's sort of tried to focus a little bit more on the positives, or what positives he could get out of some of these games, including losses. And to me, it just speaks to sort of the fragility of the mental side of this Winnipeg Jets club right now.
Yeah, I would agree. And as much as players like to tell you they don't read things, they don't see things, sometimes you're just on your phone and things pop up. And one of the things that seemed to pop up a lot throughout my playing career was what the coach would say after the game. And for whatever reason, there's some coaches around the league that don't come in and address the team after every single game. So sometimes you sit there with your thoughts and you kind of wonder, you know how it went for you internally. You have a pretty good feeling about that. But sometimes you're just so entrenched in your own game that maybe you don't know, you don't know what the coach was thinking. You don't know what was happening with other things around the ice. And so you'll see a little clip of a post-game presser from your coach. And so I think coaches like to control the narrative a little bit more. Going back to early on in the season, I agree with you. There were times where the Winnipeg Jets would win games and Bowness would kind of say, yeah, it wasn't our best stuff, but we'll obviously take the win. And I think there's something to be said for that because he's not fooling himself. He's not kidding himself when he says that kind of stuff. There are times where teams go on stretches where they win games, but they're not playing their best hockey. Maybe they got some hot goaltending. Maybe they got some timely goals and took advantage of teams. I think it's important to recognize that and remember that, okay, although we've won games here, that's great. That's currency in the bank. Over the long term here, there's things that we're going to need to rectify if we want this to be sustainable. And that's kind of what he's talking about there. And the fact that we've gotten to the point where maybe those things that he was talking about in the long term have kind of come to fruition, like these sort of bad habits from last year that are creeping back into their game. He was probably onto something. And now he's really just trying to control the narrative and say, okay, like, I want to get this team going. I'm seeing some positives. It's like, you need to try and find a way to hammer that message home to your team that there's something to build off here. Because if he runs the risk of losing his team or getting them tuned out, if he, after losses when it's not going well, really kind of buries it even more. So I think he is being careful. And I would say he's probably telling them the same thing in the room, right? It's funny, when you watch a 60-minute game, there are things that happen that are actually good clips. And you can pull those good clips, you can show them to your team, and you can be like, okay, this is the good stuff we're doing, right? The problem is the bad stuff is bigger and more frequent than I would like it to be. And maybe you pick one or two things, like I talked about earlier, kind of hammer that message home. But I think it is important in a way for coaches to understand the personalities in that room and understand which buttons you can push. From playing against some of these guys, watching them play now for a long time, Rick Bowness is kind of doing it the right way. I think he knows there's some players there that he runs the risk of kind of losing them along the way if he pushes them a little too much in a way they don't like. I'm not saying that's right. I don't think that's the way players should necessarily operate, but sometimes you just got to make do with what you have and try to maximize the best of that situation.
Frank, it's funny that you mentioned, the video and showing them positive things. You did the game against the Preds on Saturday. And, I thought the Jets worked really hard to battle back from those two one-goal deficits. And the second goal that Adam Lowry scored, being in front of the net, grabbing a rebound, scoring in the greasy areas, was exactly what's been missing and exactly what Rick Bowness has been preaching. And I joked that they should just have that goal on a loop in the dressing room going into the St. Louis game. And, unfortunately, it became a no-fly zone, i.e. no Jets in and around Joel Hofer. And, for a young guy making his second start of the year and fourth or fifth career start, the easiest 33-save shutout he'll ever have. It's so confounding that, you can hear the message, you can see the results of what happens when you do it, and then completely get away from it, especially at a time that's so crucial to be doing the things right with what's on the line right now for a team like Winnipeg.
Yeah, it is really puzzling. And, okay, so if I go through the Winnipeg Jets roster right now, okay, like Kyle Connor, he's having a good year. He's over a point per game. He's got 27 goals. Maybe not the goal scoring that we have come to expect from last season. He's not one of those guys that's going to be in and around the front of the net causing a stir. Mark Scheifele, probably not that guy either. Pierre-Luc Dubois certainly should be. Absolutely, that's his bread and butter. Blake Wheeler, absolutely should be. I would like to see a little more of that from Nick Ehlers, 9 goals on the year, and likes to play that high-flying kind of game, which, yeah, I can appreciate, but every once in a while, like, you need to make your presence known in and around the front of the net. I always kind of bring things back to other teams, other players around the league, right? And maybe how their reputation is. And I'll bring you to Toronto for a sec. William Nylander, if I asked you, what do you think of Willie Nylander? I bet most people would say, similar to Nick Ehlers, he's that high-flying, really skilled forward, maybe a perimeter player, maybe floats in and out of it a little bit. And I wouldn't disagree with you, but when you take a look at the goals Nylander has scored this year and even last year, a lot of them, actually, I'm pretty sure last year he led the team in goals in and around like that inner slot net front area. He was one of those guys, like it was in the top 2 or 3, let's say. And you don't think of him that way, but he's been very productive that way. So even though you don't think of a player like that, and maybe the player doesn't think of himself like that, ultimately, like, you have to take a few cross checks every once in a while to score a goal. You have to go somewhere that maybe you don't feel like, or it feels unnatural. I would see this problem when I played too, on teams that I played on. It was like there was no one in front of the net. There was a play in the Nashville game. Dylan DeMello got a puck at the point, and he's looking up at the net, and all he's looking at is UC Saros. Literally, all he's looking at is Saros. And he tries to make like this pass off the net, and it was a pass that kind of got deflected, and it ends up going in the corner. I believe it was in the second period. But that just kind of goes to show you that guy is looking for someone, because he knows that shot is going right into the Saros breadbasket, but there's no one to be found there. So I thought it was a really good job by Lowry. And when you talk about players who kind of make their living in the dirty areas of the ice, that's a great example of it. And to be honest with you, I would take Adam Lowry on my team as a third line center any day of the week, because I think he does a lot of things really well, and that's one of them. But sometimes it needs to be the star players who do something that's a little unnatural, maybe a little more foreign to them, and say, okay, regardless of the team kind of rolling around here on the perimeter in the offensive zone, and yeah, I want to get open for my shot. If I'm Scheifele, I want to get open for my wrist shot one-timer that I do. And I don't know, man, sometimes you just got to go against the grain and say, just going to stop in front of the net here and see if I can bang one home. And yeah, I'm going to have to take a cross-check or two, but let's be honest, like, it's not like it's not Darian Hatcher in front of the net anymore with a 2x4, laying it down on the on your back. Like there's not as much punishment in front of the net anymore. And once you've established that, like if you get there before the defenseman, they're kind of restricted now because we've seen them crack down on cross-checking. So I know we're getting long-winded here when it comes to like being in front of the net, scoring goals, but really like, no excuse for it at this point. They know the recipe. They know they need to do it. It's just a matter of, is someone or multiple players going to do it on a more consistent basis?
Frank, just before we go, I've got to ask you about special teams. And we were just mentioning Lowry. He had the huge goal on Saturday, ended up scoring the winner last night shorthanded. But the power play for the Winnipeg Jets is absolutely killing them. Not only is it not scoring, but any momentum they seem to have gets sucked out of the building and the team when they have these ineffective power plays. I mean, from your experience, when a power play has been in a real funk, you can change personnel, I guess, but what do you think the Winnipeg Jets coaches are saying to themselves inside that coaching room about the power play? And what can you do to spark some life when the guys that aren't getting it done really are the most skilled players and the guys that you really need to lean on in those situations because of the makeup of your team?
It's difficult because you want to give players autonomy to be creative and do what they do well and play to their strengths, especially on the power play. Like if you're a regular first unit power play player in the NHL, you're probably a pretty special player and you have a pretty unique skill set. With that being said, typically when power plays start to struggle, there's not enough of a shot mentality being had. There's not enough of a net front presence, and that's in the offensive zone. But where it comes before that is you're probably just not getting into the zone enough, really. Like, their entries have not been good. They have not been crisp. And it's too many, like, failed attempts down the ice. Another failed attempt down the ice. So, really, it starts with the entry. And then once you finally get set up, it's like too many wasted opportunities. Too many times where puck will kind of travel around the outside and there's a shot that gets blocked or someone gets a stick on a pass and it disrupts things. So, I've seen times where coaches kind of put this thing into place where if you win a face-off in the offensive zone on the power play, let's try and get that puck to the net 5 seconds. Like, that puck needs to be delivered to the net in 5 seconds. So everyone is on the same page as far as, okay, if it goes back to the point, and we know Morrissey has it, and maybe it goes to the half wall to Scheifele or Connor, it's like, all right, we got 2 seconds left. Someone needs to get in and around the net front area because it's coming there. And then that leads to the next part. It's like, can you retrieve a puck and then set up again? Because a lot of the time, whether it's a shot or a tip or a nice play, the first play doesn't get it done. Like, you need to wear penalty kills down. So that's why you talk about, you take a shot early, everyone's kind of scrambling defensively. Okay, where's the puck? You have one extra player on the ice. You should be the ones retrieving it. Now you set it up again. And now maybe because you took a shot, maybe some seams will open up. Maybe you're able to get it to Connor or Scheifele for that one-timer. Maybe it's that bumper player in the middle of the ice that opens up. I don't know. But it can't just be one of those things where, okay, we're going to half-ass it up the ice, expect to win a battle, luckily, and then get set up, and it'll be 1 or 2 passes. Maybe we'll play with it behind the net a little bit. Maybe we'll get an opportunity to score. It's like, that's not happening. Everything on the Winnipeg power play is slow and methodical. It kind of just needs to be one of those things that, okay, there's a purpose, a mentality. We're going to retrieve the puck, and we're doing it all over again, and it becomes a cycle.